Look at it. It is, without a doubt, the ugliest racing machine ever conceived. It looks like a washing machine strapped to four wheels. It was mocked. It was ridiculed. They called it the sucker car, the vacuum cleaner. But in 1970, this ugly, boxy appliance rolled out of a garage in the Texas desert and did something impossible. It didn't just beat the greatest racing teams on Earth. It completely humiliated them. It was so horrifyingly fast, so scientifically advanced, that it shattered the laws of physics that governed every other car on the grid. It could pull 2 Gs in a corner at 30 miles an hour. It terrified the drivers who had to follow it. And more importantly, it terrified the boardrooms of the automotive giants who realized their multi-million-dollar investments had just been rendered obsolete by a bunch of cowboys from Midland, Texas. This car wasn't beaten on the track. It was assassinated by politics. They couldn't out-engineer it, so they outlawed it. This is the explosive, technical truth behind the Chaparral 2J, the machine that proved the racing establishment hated true innovation. To understand the 2J, you have to understand the battlefield it was born into. The Canadian American Challenge Cup, Can-Am. In the late 1960s, this was the wildest racing series on the planet. Forget Formula One. F1 was strangled by rules, engine displacement limits, and weight minimums. Can-Am was the Wild West. The rules were basically 4 wheels, 2 seats, and bodywork that covered the tires. That was it. It was an engineering arms race. Teams were shoving massive, fuel-injected American V8s into lightweight aluminum chassis. We're talking 7, 8-liter engines pushing 650, 700 horsepower in cars that weighed less than a modern Volkswagen Polo. These things were monsters. But by 1969, the Unlimited series had a very limited group of winners. It was called the Bruce and Denny Show. McLaren. Bruce McLaren and Denny Hume held the series in a chokehold. Their papaya orange M8 race cars were unstoppable. They had factory backing from Chevrolet. They had the best drivers. They had unlimited budgets. They were the establishment Goliath. Every weekend, they showed up, collected the trophy, and the rest of the grid fought for scraps. Everyone accepted McLaren's dominance. Everyone except a tall, quiet petroleum engineer from Texas named Jim Hall. Jim Hall was the owner and chief engineer of Chaparral. Cars, he was a renegade. He didn't care about tradition. He only cared about physics. Hall had already revolutionized racing once. He was the guy who basically invented aerodynamic downforce with wings. He put massive movable wings on stilts above his cars years before F1 caught on. But by 1970, everyone had wings. The advantage was gone. The massive Chevy big blocks were hitting a horsepower plateau. To beat McLaren, Hall knew he couldn't just build a better car. He had to build something from a different dimension. He realized the fundamental flaw of the race car. Wings only work when you're going fast. The faster you go, the more air pushes the car down, giving you grip. But in a slow hairpin turn, your wings are useless. You have zero aero grip when you need it most. Hall asked a radical question. What if I don't need the air pushing down from above? What if I could suck the car to the track from below? If he could pull that off, he wouldn't need speed to create grip. He would have maximum downforce while sitting still in the pit lane. The machine that Hall and his small team built in Midland, Texas, was officially designated the 2J. But when the racing world saw it, they called it the sucker car. It was unlike anything ever seen. And to car guys who love engineering purity, this thing was glorious, complicated madness. Let's look under the skin. The heart of the beast was standard Can-Am artillery. It was powered by a massive Chevrolet ZL1 aluminum big block V8. Almost 8 liters of American thunder, fitted with Lucas mechanical fuel injection. It was screaming at 7,000 RPM, sending nearly 700 horsepower. To the rear wheels through a modified 3-speed automatic transmission, designed for drag racing. That alone is a monster race car. But in the 2J, that massive V8 was just the primary engine. Tucked in the back, sitting literally behind the rear axle, was the secret weapon. Hall installed a second engine. And this is where the genius gets crazy. It wasn't for driving the wheels. It was a 45 horsepower, 2-cylinder, 2-stroke engine made by JLO. It was basically a glorified snowmobile engine. And its only job was to power 2 massive 17-inch artillery-style fans taken from an M19 howitzer tank cooling system. Here's how it worked. The car's chassis was basically an upside-down bathtub. The snowmobile engine ran at a constant 6,000 RPM, spinning those massive fans. They sucked the air out from the space between the bottom of the car and the track surface. This created a partial vacuum underneath the car. Nature abhors a vacuum, so the immense atmospheric pressure of the outside air crushed the car down onto the asphalt. The result was terrifying. The system generated roughly 2,200 pounds of downforce, not at 200 miles an hour, at 0. Imagine a Volkswagen Beetle parked on the roof of the car, pressing it down, even when it was idling in the pits. But sucking air out only works if you can seal the gap between the car and the track. If air leaks in from the sides, you lose the vacuum. This was the hardest part. Hall had to invent skirts. He used a revolutionary material developed by General Electric called Lexan, a ridiculously tough polycarbonate. He framed the entire bottom of the car with these Lexan sheets. They were articulated on complex hinges and spring-loaded cables. They dragged along the ground, constantly adjusting to bumps and dips in the track surface, keeping that crucial airtight seal perfectly intact. When the 2J fired up, it was an assault on the senses. You had the deep, ground-shaking rumble of the 7-liter Chevy V8, mixed with the high-pitched chainsaw scream of the 2-stroke snowmobile engine running at full throttle. It didn't sound like a race car. It sounded like an industrial accident. And when it showed up for the 1970 season, McLaren laughed. At first, the 1970 Can-Am season, the 2J arrives. It was plagued with new car gremlins. The snowmobile engine was finicky. The complex belts driving the fans would snap. The automatic transmission couldn't handle the torque. It broke down constantly in practice. The establishment teams looked at this boxy, noisy science experiment and wrote it off as one of Jim Hall's failures. Until it completed a lap. You'd be behind it, and suddenly you were covered in rocks and dust. Those fans were sucking up everything on the track and blasting it into your windshield. But worse, you'd come into a slow corner. You'd be on the brakes, praying for grip. And that damn washing machine would just drive away from you like you were standing still. The telemetry data was baffling. In low-speed corners, where a McLaren M8D might pull 1.1 Gs of lateral force, the Chaparral 2J was pulling 1.8 to 2.0 Gs. It was cornering nearly twice as hard as the best car in the world. It defied logic. Jim Hall hired the reigning Formula One world champion, Jackie Stewart, to drive it at Watkins Glen. Stewart was skeptical of the contraption. Then he took it out for qualifying. He put the 2J on pole position. He was nearly 2 full seconds faster than Denny Hume in the factory McLaren. 2 seconds. In professional racing, that's not a gap. That's a different time zone. The laughter in the McLaren pit stopped instantly. The orange cars were suddenly obsolete. They knew that if Jim Hall could make that snowmobile engine run reliably for 2 hours, the McLaren dynasty was over. They had spent millions developing the perfect conventional race car, and a guy from Texas just beat them with suction fans and plastic skirts. The establishment panicked. And when corporations panic, they don't innovate. They litigate. The backlash was immediate. The big teams, led by McLaren, marched to the governing body of Can-Am, the SCCA, Sports Car Club of America, and demanded the 2J be outlawed. But on what grounds? It didn't break any existing rules. Remember, Can-Am was supposed to be unlimited. They found a loophole in the FIA rulebook regarding movable aerodynamic devices. The rule was originally intended to ban wings that changed angle while driving. The McLaren lawyers argued that because the fans moved and the skirts moved up and down, the entire sucker system was a movable aerodynamic device. Jim Hall argued back passionately. He pointed out that every car had movable aerodynamic devices. The wheels move. The suspension moves. The engine cooling fans move. He argued that the fans weren't aerodynamic devices. They were pumps. They were active systems, not reactive wings. The teams changed tactics. They claimed the car was unsafe. They whined that the fans were sucking up rocks and debris and blinding the drivers behind them. It was a weak excuse. Racetracks are dirty. Cars kick up stuff. But it gave the SCCA the cover they needed. The pressure from the big money teams was too much. The SCCA caved. Before the 1971 season started, they issued a new rule specifically designed to kill one single car. It banned the use of auxiliary engines to generate downforce and outlawed the sliding skirts. The Chaparral 2J was assassinated. It competed in only 4 races in 1970. It never finished a single one due to mechanical reliability issues. But it didn't matter. It had shown its potential. The establishment saw the future, and they were so terrified of it that they burned it down before it could take hold. Jim Hall was disgusted. He had played by the rules of an unlimited series. And when he won the engineering war, they changed the rules. He largely withdrew from major racing and development after the 2J. The genius was silenced. But you can't uninvent an idea. 8 years later in Formula One, Gordon Murray brought the idea back with the Brabham fan car. It won its very first race and was immediately pressured into retirement by the other teams. The concept of ground effects, using the underside of the car to generate grip, eventually took over racing, but they had to do it the hard way, with shaped tunnels and diffusers that required massive speed to work. The Chaparral 2J remains a monument to a moment when one man's ingenuity was too disruptive for the system to handle. It's the ultimate what-if of racing history. If they hadn't banned it, if Jim Hall had been given another year to make those snowmobile engines reliable, how fast could it have gone? We'll never know, because the people in charge decided that protecting the status quo was more important than seeing how fast a car could truly go.